And we're live once again. Another episode, an early morning episode of Angular Unfiltered. We accommodate all time zones here. But yeah, this one was we won't spend too much time on intros here, but this one is a well anticipated topic that a lot of the community has been asking for, or one that has been asking for a long time. So we're going to talk about the Angular roadmap today. And we got the doc up here so we can see that. Brandon T. Roberts on Twitter, Brandon T. Roberts on Twitch. And here for me today, I have Lars. Lars, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Lars Brink, and my name is probably too long that you can see my Twitter handle.
Yeah, name is like pushing your Twitter handle off the thing there, but that's
the
okay.
ultimate litmus test for whether someone did a good job at programming is always putting my name in there, and then some. So yeah, but my Twitter handle is LazyDK for Denmark, which is where I'm from. And well, I'm a front-end architect with a software consultancy called System8 in Denmark. But I'm also a very passionate blogger and tech speaker and podcast host and writing a book about Angular Ivy as well. So I'm very,
You're like all over the place is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, right now it's Angular, but I've been through like 8 frameworks or so. So It's a bit on and off.
Okay. Cool. Glad to have you on to talk about this because, like I said, a lot of people have been wondering about it. So let's get right into it. The roadmap came out. I guess it's been about a week or so, maybe 2 weeks now since the roadmap came out, and everyone's been asking about it, where it is, like what's going on with Angular. So we want to kind of talk through some of the items in the roadmap and kind of maybe go a little further about what those priorities and things are. So where would you like to start? You want to just go down the list or of in progress versus future, or you have something up front?
Well, first, let's make sure that we understand what it is and what it isn't, because I was a little bit confused about it. So the first thing you see on this page, and it is in the Angular documentation, which is good.
Yeah.
And based on what's in there and what's in their tweets and the blog post about it, they're kind of saying they're committing to updating it at least quarterly, so 4 times per year or more. So that's good. That's a pretty good frequency. What's in there? Well, there are 2 headings, except for the introduction. There's the in progress one, and then there's the future one. And obviously, the in progress one is things that they are actively working on right now. And the future one is not a commitment. Just to make that clear, not saying that's good or bad. It's what they are kind of what's on their radar. What are they planning or thinking about doing once they're done with some of the stuff in the in progress section? But the introduction is also kind of interesting because it says that their list of projects contains plenty of maintenance tasks and code refactorings, potential performance improvements, and so on. And that's the thing that's not in this roadmap. That's just regular day-to-day stuff they also have to take care of.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows that situation, especially if you've been on a platform or framework team in some organization. What also is not in that roadmap is merging Angular's main branches into Google's monorepo. That's also something I believe the Angular team is involved in. Because Google
syncing things back into what they call Google 3.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it, but
they've mentioned it publicly. So I think I don't have any details further than that about how the process, but they spoke about it publicly. So I think it's public knowledge.
Well, they like to say that they have more than 2,600 projects within Google using Angular, as far as I remember. So that's also a good piece of work. I mean, that's the way Google decides to do it, and I think that's an interesting approach of having this monorepo where if you break it, you have to fix it or help fix it. And it's not on every Angular release. It's actually, well, maybe not every single commit, but at least very frequently, more frequently than versions are released, they will migrate it into the Google monorepo. So that's also a considerable piece of work, having that many projects and being some of the ones responsible for helping make that process good for a big company.
Yeah, they have to. I'll say they have to take a more calculated approach when it comes to making changes to the framework, just for the amount of impact it could have, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I know that feeling. I'm in a platform team myself. Okay, so another task that's not on there is helping the internal Google projects migrate to Ivy, because I know they're not, a portion of them are migrate to Ivy at this point, but the rest are not. And I don't know at this point how much the Angular team themselves are involved in this, but I imagine that they are in some way and some effort. So it's not only the items on this list in progress that's all they're doing. I think it's enough having this many items to do, but there's a lot of work going on, and yeah. So that's what's not in that list.
Yeah,
Just regular
yeah,
maintenance work and company priorities.
yeah. A lot more day-to-day stuff that they, like I said, part of their regular routine that they didn't include here, but it factors in some way because those things take time also.
Exactly.
Yep.
The last thing I want to say about the structure is that even though in this introduction they mention a list of priorities that will change according to business decision and whatnot, team decisions, this is not a prioritized list as far as I've been told. So this
Okay.
roadmap is just some
Just like
random
a list
order.
items. Okay.
Don't put anything in the order of the items. So I think that's important to know, because if you're cheering for your favorite feature, whatever,
If you scroll down the list here,
yeah,
you're going to see, let's see, where's form? Well, form, I think forms is like the second one in the future,
yeah,
list, but that doesn't mean it's going to be second to get worked on.
exactly. Of course, that it's in progress is a good indication that it will come hopefully sooner than the future items.
So before
Okay.
we dive in, what was your overall perception of the roadmap itself? Were you overall positive, overall kind of middle, or negative, I guess, if you want to be?
Well, that's kind of the next thing I wanted to discuss.
Okay.
That I think it's very important we manage expectations on both sides, both the community and the Angular team, if I can say that they are two sides of the same coin. Because while we now have a visible list of all these things that they are currently working on and are looking into, working on, yeah, it's not like we know the deal. It's not, nothing is for sure.
Yeah.
Nothing is set in stone. Priorities change, and the environment changes, and technology changes, people change. So there is no commitment in basically any of this, like not 100% commitment. So it's important for us as the community to be aware of that. But it's also important for the team to be aware of whatever they put in there. Of course, there will be some expectation that this is something that won't just go away or change every day. Like, yeah, I think that's important. My overall impression is that I'm happy they did it. It's good to have transparency, and now people have a way of looking into what are they doing all this time, because things seem to have been moving pretty slow for years at this point. And what I read from this list of in progress stuff and the future stuff, and I hope we'll see that as we go through them, is that it's like recognizing that even though Ivy is out there, there's still a lot of work to do before we have like a framework which is in a good state. It's not in a very good state right now, in my opinion. And seeing those items recognizes that, and I think that's a good thing. I was a manager for a team that was everything was in a poor state, and if you don't recognize that, you won't ever be able to move beyond that. It takes a really big amount of effort, and I think basically most of the in-progress items will show that, and we can discuss that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, like I said, the first part of it is recognizing where you're at, and then trying to course correct and move, like steer in another direction so that you can start moving towards progress. So yeah, definitely, you can definitely see that in the doc and in the roadmap.
So other things about managing expectations, seems like there are even more. They're kind of regrouping now and figuring out what's the best way to move forward. We saw version 9 being very much delayed because of Ivy, because they wanted to have Ivy in version 9, because well, it was sort of there in version 6 and 7 and 8, but not very stable. What we're seeing now from the communication is that they really want to get to more of a release train cadence, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, the same thing kind of happened with the web standards, HTML and CSS, or at least the HTML and JavaScript. A new standard is out there every year, and whatever is done will be in that standard. And what's not done will be in the next version. And the same thing will happen now with Angular. They are working on all these things, but they're not as much targeting a specific version. They would much rather have a reliable release schedule and saying every or 2 times per year we will see a major version with breaking changes. And what's the other, like, minor versions? I don't remember if there's a certain, I think there's a patch version every week, basically. Minor versions can come.
Yeah, I think their minor versions are more, or patch versions at least are weekly, and then of course minor versions are as they land new features, or able to put new stuff in there and put that in a release. So
a lot of interesting stuff can come in the minor releases. It doesn't have to be about the major releases. In fact, as we saw in version 10, the major release can be kind of boring. But that's the kind of thing we should expect. Some of the major versions will be boring because it will just be all this maintenance and keeping the framework up to the state of the art when it comes to its dependencies and its tooling and all of that, support for all the browsers and the whole tool chain. So in some ways, it's a good thing. And I hope we will see some nice minor releases with some nice features eventually. Could be a while, as we might get an indication of as we now go into the individual items on that list. The final thing, sorry, Brendan. The final thing I want to say is, in my opinion, maybe there's too many items in the list. And the tweet that announced it by the Angular official Twitter account said, take a look at the initiatives we have in store and stay tuned because more are on the way. And as a former product manager, wow, even I think 21 items is enough. It's plenty.
Took a step back and I guess looking at it from a different angle, given the state that the project was in or is working to move forward from, usually like piling more items on the list may hinder that some.
Yeah, I would say stay focused. This in progress stuff, like I would be amazed if that was in version 11. I don't know, and of course they don't know either, because they have a goal and an ambition to land certain stuff. But now it's a release train, so whatever is done will be in that version.
Right, and some of these are like external dependencies. We haven't even. I guess we'll talk about that once we get further down in this list here. But like I said, some of these things in the release depend on other teams that they don't have necessarily control over to, release theirs or help come up with their execute on their plan first. So it's some cooperation that has to happen there too.
Yeah, but it's very good to see that, because that's what we should expect when from a framework that likes to say that it's the better is included framework. Here's a nice developer experience out of the box, all the tools you need, and with the flexibility to replace them if you need something else. And you know a lot about this working for Narwhal, having an alternative tool chain for all this.
Yep.
Yeah, let's get into the items because time is ticking away. But my recommendation is don't put more stuff in there. There's plenty. There's plenty to go around. Just keep focusing and keep churning out.
So you're saying we need a scope freeze at this point with all the items that are currently in the list.
Yeah, I get nervous when they say more stuff is coming.
I guess they just want us. They want us to remain excited. But they got the roadmap out here, and like we said, I think there's some things in here that people are still waiting for that they may have coming. So they want to just put that out there. Like I said, those things are going to take time.
Yeah.
But eventually they will get there.
I see a small comment in the chat saying, "I hope they fix multiple TS configs in a project. My IDE is getting confused." And if I understand this correctly, maybe it's about the solution style TS configs that they are now rolling back. They were part of version 10. They will disappear in version 11 again if you use the Angular CLI and the migrations. It is a TypeScript feature introduced in version 3.9 or so. So you can keep using them. Just be careful that the migrations don't take them away if you want to continue having them.
Okay, so I guess real quick, don't want to get derailed here. I thought that's getting rolled back in version 11, or they are rolling it back now I thought they were going to do a migration.
Well, it is a breaking change. So following semantic versioning, they would have to wait for version 11 or rush version 11.
So that would be we just released version 10 like a month ago, but here's version 11 because we had to roll back this thing.
Okay, they are asking about what is the issues with. Let me see if I can find. There is definitely some issues.
Yeah. Well, let's go.
They were in. Go to Twitter.
Yeah,
I tweeted about it these past few days. There was a lot of issues with it. We have many items to go through, so let's get started, Brandon.
Yeah, check out the Angular CLI repo, and you'll see what the changes are there to see what the strategy is for rolling that back. But yeah, let's get right into it. You want to just go down the list, or you want to pick something out first?
Well, we have 10 minutes or so.
It'll be speedy. If you got more time, I got more time. So.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I have plenty of time.
Yeah.
The first one is Operation Bye Backlog or Bylog.
Yeah.
And I don't know specifically if they are referring to, but there is a milestone on GitHub that's called backlog, and it's all the issues that have been triaged but hasn't been scheduled into any ongoing work. And it's a big one. It's like more than 2,000 open issues.
So, we've been at 2,000 issues for a while now. So I'm glad that I know they've been working on them, but it's like an uphill battle, right?
Well, the backlog milestone is only the triage issues. And the number of open issues as of August 1st across all the three main Angular repos is 4,913. It's been stable for the past few months. It took a big dive between April and May. They got it down from 5,500 to just around 5,000, and it's been stable since. So that's good, and that's what they're kind of describing here. That right now they are committing about 50% of their engineering capacity into triaging all the issues on GitHub and kind of come up with a plan on how to systematically go through them and close them or fix them, whatever. And after triaging, they will keep committing 20% of engineering capacity to keep that number stable and hopefully make it decrease, because 5,000, that's a lot. It's more than double the amount of competing frameworks put together. So so that's big. So that's the first one. The next one. Oh, and if I was to categorize this one, I would say it's a mountain of technical debt. So
Yeah,
it's not a
yeah,
feature, it's not an improvement, it's just technical debt built up during the time of producing Ivy, where that
yeah.
was the main
That
focus.
was one thing that when I first saw the list, I was like, a lot of these things are, or some of them are maintenance items. They're things that they have to keep moving the framework forward, or like I said, not to let the issue list get out of control or get further along than it is now. So, which I think is good. Like I said, it goes along with the, like I said, long-term health of the project. So, and issues are just part of a project that need to be maintained. So
Yeah. Next one is TypeScript 4.0. And I'm happy to see that the Angular team manages to keep up with recent versions of TypeScript. 4.0, while it seems like a major release, actually every release of TypeScript is major in terms of breaking. There's always breaking changes either for consumers or for library authors. And be very careful about going through the changelog of TypeScript. There's always breaking changes. And Angular doesn't really help you with that. You have to take care of that yourself.
right.
But it's
like
good because it's coupled to Angular when we're using Angular because of the compiler. And this is what they're talking about, I think, is making sure the compiler works with version 4. There's not much major stuff going on in version 4. I don't think it's significantly bigger than any of the other releases. So hopefully that won't be too much of a challenge. Maybe there's something in the compiler API that I'm not aware of. But looking at what's new for consumers, yeah, it's not a really big release in my opinion.
Yeah, there was I can't think of the name of it now, but I know there's some stuff with some new types you can use in 4.0. I know that I was just going to admit Alex is a lot more into the TypeScript minutia than I am, but I think in some ways, at least from what I've seen, it'll allow us to clean up. Santos said that variadic types.
Yes.
So yeah, that's one thing I know is coming there. And like I said, I'll have to look into it more. But anything that can help us clean up the types and not have to have so many overloads and things, I'm all for that. So it'd be just something to dig into further. And if we can do that as library authors, that will definitely help us and help Angular. So,
but this is just another example of a maintenance task. This is just what you need to do to keep up with the ecosystem, the platform, the web platform, all of that. So it's good that it's there because of course it takes time. So it's good that we have the transparency of being able to see that some effort is being put into this, and other things will have to wait because we need to keep up with the current state of the whole ecosystem around it.
It's like we can't just say TypeScript 4.0 and that be the only thing, because we still got to do work, and even the developers still have to do work. And if TypeScript breaks something there, we still have to fix those things too. So yeah, definitely. I don't know what the timeline is for TypeScript 4.0, but like I said, it's one of those external things that they're probably working on. At least have some kind of spike of what that looks like, so they'll have maybe an easier transition, but we'll see.
I would expect to see that in version 11 because the final version of TypeScript 4 will be out pretty soon. Okay, next one is end-to-end testing strategies, and Angular comes with this tool chains out of the box with Angular CLI, and the default end-to-end testing framework is Protractor, and it's a Google testing framework. And there's a lot of negativity around it in the community, and people seem to prefer Cypress, even though there's a ton of other alternatives. Not saying that Cypress is bad, but there are many alternatives out there. Like Test Cafe is pretty similar to Cypress. There's WebDriver IO and Nightwatch, and there's plenty of other tools, Intern, and of course you can use Puppeteer and Playwright, and a bunch of other stuff. So now with the CLI, the way it's built, you can integrate other tools as well relatively easily. With NX, the default choice is Cypress.
Yep, it chose Cypress as a default.
So why is this on the list, Brandon?
I would say, like you said, because of where Protractor is, like I've used Protractor in the past, and it hasn't been a good experience. Like in general, once you get to a certain point, like you get to a point where like the Protractor tests become unstable, and then you want to try something else, but like you've built up this infrastructure around Protractor. And if it was easier to plug in something else like Cypress, like NX uses Cypress, so we have to do some mechanics around what's generated out of the box and then replacing that with Cypress. So if you could have just say, okay, don't give me any Cypress, and I'll put my own stuff in there instead of having to delete the Protractor configuration and all that, and something that, or Test Cafe or whatever else framework or EDE framework you want to use, then allowing that to be pluggable at the CLI level or lower level, I think would be nice. But I guess the other side of that is if they go that route, then what's the recommendation in the docs? Like, do we have an EDE testing guide for the options, or I'm still a little unclear on what that is, but having the option there, I think, would make it easier for developers to explore other
Okay. Well, I
options
have
out
another angle on that. The
Okay.
reason it's there is it says evaluate the state of Protractor.
Mm.
It's in a pretty poor shape, let me tell you that. And the Angular team took it over almost a year ago, or at least 3 quarters ago, and it's notoriously mismaintained. And it hasn't kept up with the WebDriver APIs and the Selenium APIs under that. For example, it's still using the synchronous APIs, whereas with the version 4, I think, or something of WebDriver, everything is async, and you can't really have that synchronous patch anymore. So all our end-to-end tests using Protractor would have to change to using async await or some promise-based APIs instead. So it would be a major breaking change for all of our tests. Maybe there was a migration out of that, but I would be amazed if it would cover all edge cases. They did manage to. There was a version 6 of Protractor, but it was very unofficial. It was never really tagged as the latest version, and there was never any patch versions after that. It was an attempt of upgrading some of those dependencies. But the Angular team with version 10, I think, of Angular released Protractor version 7. So it deprecated some of the older Node.js APIs, but it didn't upgrade the WebDriver APIs. So we're still in that, several years behind keeping up with the ecosystem. So is that effort worth investing in? Or should they recommend another solution out of the box? I guess that's some of the things they might want to explore at this point.
Yeah, because we've said this before. Like I said, they can't. Well, we don't think that they should take on any more. So, like writing their own something new would take away from some of these other things on the list. So, allowing to defer that. If they say Protractor is no longer the option, then there has to be some kind of alternative to recommend there. If they're not going to write something from scratch or open source something that they've already been using, but I think Protractor is the thing that's using internally. So,
to Protractor's defense, I will say that if you want to run your tests on real browsers, not all tools or frameworks allow that. And it has legacy support for Internet Explorer and the Edge Classic version, the proprietary Microsoft one that was now replaced by Chrome. But we will have to maintain those in enterprise for a very long time because they're tied to certain versions of Windows, and the IT departments take some time to upgrade to Edge Chromium or even get away from Internet Explorer, which now has extended support to 2025 or something like that. So it's a long way into the future.
More Internet Explorer support. That's what we want.
Yeah, exactly. So Yeah, the Angular team has recently deprecated Internet Explorer version 10, but 11 is still on there, I think. So I guess they would have to offer at least one solution covering Internet Explorer 11 out
Yeah.
of the box.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
let's go to the next one. Angular libraries use Ivy.
that's an interesting one. And by the way, the item we just discussed, that's also technical debt, in my opinion. So
Right.
another one of those. This one is also technical debt because of Ivy. So we're in kind of this migration transition from View Engine to Ivy. Ivy is out there. Libraries are still published with View Engine. The CLI would prevent you from compiling with AOT Ivy compilation and put that on NPM. At some point, it was said that the Ivy instruction set would be finalized or stable in version 10 of Angular. That's no longer the case. In fact, now there's the RFC and a design document out for this libraries, Ivy libraries distribution. So yeah, there it is on the top, pinned issues.
Yeah, I was just trying to
It's a
bring it up.
very interesting one. But basically, there is no plan right now of transitioning to libraries. I've been asking about it, but they didn't really know. I wrote an article about it, but that's no longer up to date because no one knows at this point. But this is that design document. We'll try to figure that out. It closes on the 20th of August in 8 days. So be quick if you want to voice your opinion. The current proposal, in a nutshell, is right now we have the NGCC compiler that will recompile Angular libraries into Ivy code, but like changing your node modules folder, which is not always good.
It's a little dicey. It's a little dicey.
Yeah, it's a little unpleasant. But anyways, the original plan was that libraries could compile with Ivy, and that's it. No more compilation on the application side. That's no longer the plan. The arguments are in that design document and this RFC. The design document is a bit lower. It's the design document for what they call the Angular linker. And the Angular linker is going to replace the NGCC on the application compilation side. So libraries will compile to a new format called something with a L and a T, I think, linking something format.
Yeah.
And so
We're
that's
currently on the Angular package format, so I guess we're going to transition to this new format. Which I can't see what I think it's
very
LF.
interesting. Yeah, LFO maybe or something like that. Yeah, also as it's mentioned here, they will remove, the proposal is to remove UMD from the Angular package format. ES5 was already removed. I think they even want to remove the flat modules format and only have ES modules, ES 2015.
Okay.
To kind of put less of a load on, well, maintenance, first of all. Also, NPM download size for all parties.
Yeah,
So
that's
good.
interesting that they would move to, I guess it's standard underneath once you get to a certain point, but at least move that up a level higher so that, like you said, they don't have to write as much custom tooling for Angular's custom package format. So, and the person in the chat mentioned it's LTO.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's that.
So that is the format that libraries should compile to according to this proposal, and it compiles some of the things like linking components together and things like that, but it doesn't compile everything related to the view. So the template will just be a string for components, and it will be compiled as part of your application. The same for something like host bindings and view queries and content queries, stuff like that, would also be compiled by your application. And yeah, look into the details of the document to understand why. But the good thing about it is it will be a one-time cost. It's basically a post-install hook. So you install a library, you compile it once, and that's it. and it's not cached in the node modules folder. It's cached somewhere else that this Angular linker keeps track of.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a better experience than the NGCC. But it's not fully compile IVE instruction set, deploy that to NPM, and people don't have to compile in their application. We can't get there right now because
it's more of
they're
a
kind of
transition.
thinking the IVE instruction set is not really stable yet. They still want to change some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't want to commit to the IVE instruction set as a kind of a public API where libraries and applications will depend on that. They might go there eventually, and that would be very powerful for the ecosystem. There's a lot of new tools and templating engines, compilers, developer tools could benefit from having a common target. But that's that. That might be someplace in the future. It's still in there, something they might want to do at some point. But right now, this is the proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, if you have some opinions on this RFC, I just will say props to the Angular team for opening up that RFC publicly, as opposed to recent where most things have been just done internally and then you see a PR or something. So opening up that process for comment or request for comments is definitely, we want to see more of that.
So that was a technical depth in the way I categorize it.
Yeah.
The next one is RxJS, right? That's a maintenance task in my opinion because it's keeping up with the ecosystem. Again. Version 7 of Rx. Sorry.
Yeah, so I don't know what the version of or what the status of version 7 is. I know they went beta maybe a few weeks ago, but I don't know if it's still on betas or if it's moved on from that or not.
It's still in beta. I think there's at least 2 betas out now. We will probably see it before the end of the year, so it could be nice to get that in version 11 of Angular by the end of the year. The RX7 doesn't remove a lot. It only removes what was already deprecated.
Yeah.
There is some operators being renamed, and that was, but I think they were deprecated already in some of the major minor previous releases. So there will not be a lot of new stuff. There's some, and In Depth will have articles on that. But it's mostly about deprecating stuff, and then version 8 of RxJS will be, well, maybe it will not be packed with a lot of features, but it'll be focused around being smaller and having a small footprint on your application, being more tree shakeable and removing some old legacy stuff from the code base. So it's kind of a preparation major version for version 8. So
Like I said, that one hopefully, well, I guess if we're tracking here, we got, if TypeScript 4.0 and RxJS 7 land before the end of the year, then we're going to hit another release for the end of the year. That's already 2 things for version 11 that could be potentially there.
I definitely think that's what they're trying to do, make a version 11 in November or December or something like that. And these are just regular tasks that have to continuously be maintained, right?
Yeah.
But like it's good that they're doing it. They're prioritizing it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be done. It would be postponed because there's pressure to do other stuff. So
yeah, Santos said to promise is gone, he thinks. Yeah, I know they had, at least they had made that known that they were deprecating to promise, but I don't know if it's going to be removed.
There will be separate operators, but I think maybe it will only be removed in version 8 or something like that. It's definitely going away pretty soon. Okay, next one we have here, Brandon, is Angular Language Service uses Ivy. And I would say, well, I would put it somewhere between technical death and an improvement to the developer tools, because Ivy is out, but the tooling is not using Ivy. And I think in particular, it's not using what we can allow with the strict template type checking, where we can go and actually type check embedded views, as they're called, and even down to the implicit context variables for templates. which is very nice. But you're seeing when you compile stuff, it'll throw errors that you're not able to see with the language service right now. So that's where they want to take that full migration into Ivy and have our Angular language service support that. So very good.
Yeah, I'm
But
going to
it's
chalk this
it's
one
just
under
yeah.
developer experience, because, like I say, if you're using VS Code or some of these other tools, you probably using Angular language service through an extension, and I think hopefully it'll speed it up too, because it can get bogged down sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I would still, I will support developer experience, but I would also put it in technical debt bucket in my list here, because it should have landed with Ivy. We're now 2 versions into Ivy, so
Yeah, I would
in
agree.
ideal
I would
world,
agree.
it should be there already. What is the next one?
The next one is expand component harnesses best practices. I think they talked about this at NGConf about component harnesses in the CDK to make interacting with material or interacting with Angular components or testing Angular components less prone to breakage when they change things internally.
So I wrote an article covering just getting started with writing your own harnesses and using the ones provided by Angular Material and also Angular CDK. It's a very nice way of testing, because you can reuse these test harnesses between unit tests and
Mm-hmm.
end-to-end tests. You would have to create your own what's called a harness environment to use it with anything other than Protractor. But
Okay.
there's a guide how to do it. It's not easy, but there's a guide, and you can look into the Protractor reference implementation. Except it's a partial implementation. There is a big one that's not even implemented yet, so that's a little of technical debt there as well. But yeah, it's pretty nice experience. But I think the reason they're doing this is the next item, or the item about MDC Web. That's 2 items down.
Mm-hmm.
They're replacing some of the internals of Angular Material to use material design components for web, which is a vanilla JavaScript framework where you get JavaScript and you get Sass style sheets, and then you build an adapter on top of them to plug them into whatever JavaScript framework you're using. So Angular Material will be adapting MDC Web, and because of that, the internal DOM structure and the class names are going to be different.
Yeah.
And if you have tests that rely on that DOM structure, it will break a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
you should
Which
be
is why they were
migrating.
trying to introduce the component harnesses in the first
Exactly.
place.
So you should be migrating to that. Otherwise, your tests are going to break eventually. And we'll discuss that point in a moment about MDC Web. So
Okay.
what's that item? I think it's an improvement. There's a little of technical debt. It's also, as they mentioned, it's also an internal priority of Google because they have that many projects and they might have similar tests that will break. So they're also going to spend some effort on education internally. And maybe we'll see some best practices, like we have the Angular style guide, and there's a Protractor something style guide as well.
Okay. Let's see, what's next? Support native trusted types in Angular.
Yeah,
Now,
I mean,
don't know much
do you have
about
any
this.
comment on that?
No, I don't know much about this one at all. If
So it's
it
related.
gives us some native types, then I think that's a good thing.
It's related to security, of course. This CSP, content security policy. So of course, security is good, and Angular is a pretty secure framework, unless you go into the insecure parts of it. But the trusted types, the thing there that makes me go, what is up? Is if you look at the browser compatibility, it's Chrome and nothing but Chrome. Of course, like Edge Chromium and Opera as well, but no one else is supporting that. So why?
Yeah, why is this
spend
item on the
time
list?
doing that?
Yeah.
Like, only people.
I would say this would probably fall, like I said, fall more in in line with Google internal things. So
Yeah.
they at least want to support it. It may not be something that the external community actually uses, but they at least support it so they can do it internally. Because I guess at the end of the day, Angular is done out in the open, and they use it the same way that everyone else does.
So that's my opinion also, because this is just an experimental API. It's not standardized or anything like that. So it's just coming out of nowhere from Chrome, basically. So yeah, but still, it's security. Security is good, but it's not supported in many browsers yet. So next one is this MDC Web. We already discussed it a bit. It's been in the it's actually published as 2 packages. There's the Angular Material Experimental and the Angular CDK Experimental, where they try to adapt this MDC Web. And I just went in and looked, and there's a lot of work to do yet. Some of the components are scaffolded, but there's no implementation in there. There's just to-do comments. They've been working on it since April 2019, and there's still a long way to go. So, and I'm kind of questioning, for the community, what's the benefit? From Google's internal point of view, it makes sense. They will have the mythical synergy of not building the same thing twice or 3 times. But to us, it just seems like a lot of effort for no, okay, so it will follow the material design spec a bit more. And that is needed, because it's basically far away from material design spec by now, because that's a living standard, and Angular material hasn't really been keeping up. So it's a small improvement. But we're also paying the cost of having to move to component harnesses, which is also a good thing in the long run, but it's also an effort from us as a community to go down that route.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I don't have anything to add there. It's something underneath. I use Angular material pretty much on, at least for side projects and things. So, so if it's tooling underneath, I'm just gonna this is one of those cases where I just use it, and if they make it better for me, that's great. So
I would say it's primarily a Google internal concern, this one as well.
Okay, and this one is, well, I guess it says it in the title, offer Google engineers better integration with Angular and Google's internal server stack.
Yeah.
Not much as far as details here, but other than it's an internal project, so only speculation would happen there.
Well, at least they're being transparent about it, that it will take some effort that's worth mentioning. So they put it in here. So that's good, and it's completely understandable.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, like you said, it lets us know that, they're, like they mentioned in the beginning, they have internal priorities and community priorities, and being able to say that, this is part of that, lets us know about the scope of work of things that they have to do just outside of maintaining Angular itself. Because they also have to support the teams that use it internally.
Angular versioning and branching. So what is this one? There's 2 very similar ones. I think this one is about the tool chain of publishing. What else is in there?
Consolidate release management tooling between multiple repositories. Because those, of course, Angular, CLI, and components are in separate repos right now that have their own tooling infrastructure.
Exactly. And they use, they each have different approaches and tooling for commits and PRs, change logs, and releasing. So they want to consolidate that. So that's another of those synergies. But would it do anything different for us as a community? I think it's just a maintenance task.
Yeah,
it will be good, because they will have, we can better understand how to contribute, and they can make it more streamlined. But it's also just an effort that doesn't pay off immediately.
Yeah. Also, I think if I'm reading it correctly, when they do releases, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of coordination that has to happen there across the 3 things so that they remain in line. So streamlining that would allow them to say, okay, we're going to cut a release in, these 3 all the packages are going to be maybe on the same major version. They can be released as a one unit, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to click the button, now you click the button, and now you click the button. Everybody do their release strategy. So bringing that all together, I think will help. Even that, like you said, in contributions also.
Yeah. Okay, so that was all the in progress items, and there's no shiny features in there, Brandon. What are we going to do?
That's okay. I mean, I said that when I saw the list, was I don't see any. These things are maintenance, housekeeping type things, and we also want to see some features there. So we'll like I said, this is like half of me wants to see stability, release process improvements, overall framework health improvement. So I will see the I want the shiny thing now for these improvements, because I think overall in the long term it'll help contributors, which is what I'm probably more attached to, is being able to contribute to the framework. So
yeah, I think especially the one about libraries is important to get finished, and having the transition plan from View Engine to Ivy. And many of these items is about fully removing the View Engine, because it's still in there lurking in the dark, and it especially shows with the libraries and this NGCC process.
Okay, so we made it through the in progress stuff. Now we get to go into future.
Yeah,
things,
given the time, maybe we should just go through the interesting ones, or have people from the chat mention what they want to know about. Or
yeah, we can go through some of these we can either go through some of these pretty quickly, or we can do do another one where we kind of dive into these a little more. But I'll speak about the introductory documentation, because that's kind of close. That's close to where I'm at. So documentation and stuff is close to my heart. So redefining the user learning journey and refreshing the introductory documentation, I think, is good. I worked on what is the getting started application that's out there now for new Angular developers. And yeah, okay, let me rephrase that. I worked on it. I was not the only person. Steven spearheaded that. So definitely props to Steven, and Jennifer, who doesn't work on the Angular team anymore, worked on that also. So we collaborated on that, and it turned out pretty well, I think, to kind of mix what a new Angular developer would need to know with not having to throw too many things at them at once. But that being said, always looking forward to making the starting process with Angular easier. I'm definitely on board with that. And the lead over it now, Dave Shevitz, is definitely doing a great job of trying to identify what a new user would have, what the new user journey is, and identify and make that process as frictionless as possible. So definitely looking forward to seeing more of that.
Well, even though it's in future, we're already starting to see things being reorganized within the documentation, and it's happening all the time, not just with major and minor releases. It's being broken down into smaller pieces and more logical pieces.
Yeah, I saw my beloved router guide got split up into multiple parts. I was like, hey, this is great. Now you can get to the 80% of what you do with the router in a single page. And then if you want to go the deep dive, you can go down into the other section. So definitely like that.
The tutorial with the milestone is now in a separate page. I think that's very interesting. And I went through it recently to figure out how to do tests using the router testing module. Yeah, definitely that one was too long. It was
it's
information overload.
It's grown over time for sure. And I contributed to it, so I know.
Not saying it's bad, but it's definitely good to take fresh pair of eyes and see how could we make this easier to navigate. That's very important with online content.
Yep. Strict typing for Angular forms. I know this is a well requested feature or well requested item in the Angular forms. I guess specifically reactive forms, because like today you get most of the types you get today are any when you use a reactive form. So adding some types there, which I would imagine would have a pretty big impact as far as breaking changes, but definitely so would be a welcome feature.
Yeah, it's definitely a big improvement, and I think the first item was also an improvement item on what we already have, and that's very good.
Mhm. Yeah, like I said, I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that. I had saw that I guess the guy who originally, or person who originally was trying to make that work, uh, said that they weren't able to do it anymore, but someone else has picked that up. Santosh, I mentioned that also in the chat. That's one of the collaborators is picking that up. So definitely good to have some movement on that one. Webpack 5 in the Angular CLI.
Well, it's just another maintenance task, but the interesting thing here is federated modules.
Yeah.
That I know
Shout out to
Manfred Tyler. Yeah,
Manfred for writing a post on federated modules.
yeah, that's very interesting, and he might manage to sneak that into the Angular CLI at some point.
Or he'll just build something that's like a plugin or something, and then people will start using it. Enough people start using it. Well, they'll take a hard look at integrating it in. But I believe he's a collaborator also, so he's probably already got something in the works there for that.
It's not specifically mentioned the federated modules, but for starters, you need Webpack 5. So, so that's one step in that direction.
Yeah, well, but like I said, Webpack 5 is another thing that external, like community facing, Google doesn't use it internally. So they definitely still have some effort towards that. Commit message standardization. This
The
is,
same thing.
yeah, more, I'm going to chalk this one up to the housekeeping that goes along with the other one we mentioned about the tooling, infrastructure, and everything. So commit messages, unified commit messages are nice, but those are project specific, I would think.
I'm looking forward to unified change logs because they're in 3 different ways right now.
Yep. So here we go. Optional Zone.js. Now,
Oh
I'll
yeah.
consider this one. This one's probably this one I'll consider a big one. It's 2 over here that are considered big ones that are very future thinking. I know this one you probably can talk at length about this one and the other one. So
Yeah, I'll just say I have a podcast episode out on the Deep Dive podcast with Michael Latke speaking in depth about this topic with the starting point of the async pipe, because that's the first place where you would notice
yeah, he
your
said the
Angular
async
application
type.
breaking.
He said the
When you're moving
async type was boring. So I remember that's what I remember from the sound bite.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But yeah, async pipe won't work without zone. So there is a problem with Zone.js, and that is, well, it's been known for a while. Ever since native async await made it into the standard of JavaScript, which was in the version 2018. Now we have like syntax that is async and needs to be patched by Zone.js. You wouldn't really be able to do that except with a compiler, maybe. So maybe
Right.
it would be doable by Angular using a compiler for everything. But basically, we're at a point where Zone.js can't monkey patch everything because now it's not an API, it's not an object that you can replace or monkey patch intercept anymore. So if you output your bundle today to ES 2018, and you're using async await, or a library you're using is using async await, you're out of luck. Even with Zone.js still in the framework. So it is kind of a ticking bomb, in my opinion. So it's good, but it's a very big effort. There is a design document for
optional
find it
zone.
here, for a new approach to change detection in Angular, and we thought we just had it down. Maybe you can share this link I put in the private chat here in StreamYard.
Yeah. Let's see.
right when we thought we had finally understood the change detection of Angular, they will change it again.
Everything you know about change detection is changed.
Yeah. Well, basically, they are looking to improve this kind of this experimental API, the standalone function called Mark30, that does support zoneless application, and they're looking to integrate a lot of customizing the change detection by providing options to the Mark30. And actually, they are working with Michael Latke because he's doing these things already with Arc's Angular template. So the team is collaborating with him on how that could be integrated into Angular, maybe, or some of the experiences of doing that in the library. So you can kind of do change detection on a more granular level in a convenient API, and it would work even without zones.
Okay.
Very interesting, and a big one, very big one.
Yep. So definitely, like I said, Michael Lackey has already had Arc's Angular template out there. He also plugged Njerk's component because he implemented that also. That came out with version 10.
Yeah, and that also supports zoneless, by the way, Njerk's component.
Yep.
With the push pipe.
So next one is remove legacy view engine. We consider cleanup. Well, it's not minor cleanup, but at some point, view engine will be deprecated long enough to where they will remove it so that you have to upgrade to Ivy to be able to continue upgrading Angular. So
the original plan was to release Ivy with no opt-out option. So basically, Ivy's here, view engine is gone. But it didn't go that way. And now we're kind of in this limbo.
Software projects are prone to do, yes.
Yeah, we all know that. So now we're in this limbo, and especially the libraries authors are like, what's going on? What are we supposed to do? So yeah, it will be good to finally get rid of that view engine.
Yeah.
But it's a big one. It's integrated into many pieces of the code base and the framework and the tooling. So it's a big effort.
Yeah, so next one is Angular Dev Tools. And today, most people are familiar with Augury as the tool for Angular for like profiling or at least inspecting what's running in your Angular app as long as it's not in production mode. So I guess they're going to introduce an official Angular Dev Tools, which will maybe give you some more. I'm guessing this is just going to build on top of Ivy, gives you more debugging and profiling things to help, like I said, help developers understand component structure and things like that. So I think there's
I don't know any details about this one, but yeah, the Augury one, I actually use it from time to time. Many people says it's useless. I think it's all right because you can just go and inspect any element and get the component from there. But it's not really taking good use of the new runtime debugging APIs introduced with Ivy. There is another extension actually called SB, Angular Inspector.
Okay.
I think it was introduced around the time of Ivy, but I haven't really looked too much into it, so I don't know if it has some additional exciting features. But it is out there on the Chrome extension store, SB Angular Inspector.
Okay, yeah, send me a link to it, and we'll include it in the show notes so people can check it out.
So this one is Angular Dev Tools. That's definitely a new feature.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, definitely consider it new. I guess we have to wait for more information on that one. And here we are with the probably your your biggest item here that you've been shouting from the top of the hills.
Yeah, it's my boilerplate.
Okay, there we go. See, we almost made it through without the boilerplate, but I've never referred to anyone refer to NG modules as boilerplate, but here we are. So
yeah, and the Angular team likes to say, or you have to say, it'll be optional NG modules. I will say, get rid of those damn NG modules. Like
there we go. Now we're unfiltered. Now
So, well, what is this all about? Well, first of all, the promise of Angular 2 was the tombstone on top of the ng module.
Hmm.
Goodbye. It's not there. And it wasn't for the first many versions until we went into release candidate 5 or so of Angular version 2. And
Yep.
then they reintroduced Angular modules, of course, in the new Angular way instead of the Angular JS way. And what's the reason for that? Well, it was a way to give the compiler instructions about how to link all these pieces together.
Hmm.
But why would we want to get rid of it? Well, first of all, it's very difficult for newcomers to Angular to understand. JavaScript already has a module system. Why would we need another module system? I see this question very often. So it's like it just adds to the steep learning curve that Angular
Yeah.
already has in some places.
Yeah, we got Angular modules, we got imports, we got exports, and then we got JavaScript or
Yeah.
imports and exports and modules. So yeah, it definitely is one of those things you can get tripped up. A new developer can get tripped up on. You get used to them after you use them for a while, but like I said, and part of it like I said, going back to the RC5 where Angular was at one point just components, and that's what at least from my point of view, just what I'm trying to get back to is Angular being just about components, where we can use those as our primary method of registering or building the UIs instead of having to use ng modules everywhere. But we'll see how this goes. I'm just going to say up front, I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon, just because they're so embedded with the platform. So it will definitely be a big change to not have them there at all.
I've written about them a few times, and there's a lot of stuff missing to go fully be able to produce an application with all the Angular features without ng modules.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need routed components. We need without Angular modules. We need injector management, tree schedule provider, style compilation, style encapsulation, local component scope for declarable dependencies. We need compilation schemas, and we need to be able to bootstrap components as Angular applications without Angular modules. So that's a very long list. So it'll be a very big effort. But I think we should go there. And yeah, I'm not saying you have to get rid of Angular modules. I think it's okay to support two ways of using the framework. Angular is known for being opinionated, but in some places it does support multiple ways of using the framework. For example, do you want to have this excessive dirty checking with the default change detection strategy and Zone.js, or do you want to use onPush, and do you even want to remove Zone.js eventually?
Mm-hmm.
We have the same thing with forms. Do we want the reactive forms or the ones that are familiar to AngularJS developers, model-driven forms? So that's another place we have two choices. And of course, with the Angular CLI, you can use our tools, or you can integrate your own with builders and schematics and all of that. So it's not always there's one way, the Angular way. And in some situations, they support more ways of using the framework.
Yes, I know. I'm pretty sure you're going to have more to say about optional ng modules in the future, but definitely looking forward to what that looks like at some point.
Well, I have a talk that's from spring 2019, and I wrote the article for that in, I think it was December 18. At that point, I was already tired about hearing about Ivy, and it seemed it would never appear.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a while before it did. But I was like, okay, so what can we actually do? What is new with Ivy? And the only thing I heard about was optional ng modules that kept being mentioned, but without any details about what would that look like, what would that experience be like, how would you write that code in practice. And then I saw a pull request by Minko Getchev, just when he joined the Angular team in the end of 2018 or something like that. And that was a proposal to introduce a metadata option for the component decorator called depths for dependencies. And in that, you would be able to list declarable dependencies, so the directives, components, and pipes you're using in your component template. I think it was even meant to support listing Angular modules
Mm-hmm.
in that depth property as well. But it was postponed because of Ivy, and here we are, almost 2 years later, and maybe we'll start looking into this in the future of this roadmap, and I will be very interesting to follow that. It even ties into the next item on the list
Mm-hmm.
very nicely.
Ergonomic component level code splitting APIs.
Yes. So there has been many talks. I might even have given a workshop about it myself, or a talk about lazy loading components without Angular modules and without the router. And we do have the option to do that with Ivy because of this principle of locality.
Yep.
But it's not really a well-supported story of Angular right now. It has some of the issues I just explained or mentioned with Angular modules. That
Mm-hmm.
you can load and you can render a component, but that component can't even use other components, at least not without Angular modules. And then now
Right.
you are trying to hack the framework, and I did do that with started with scams, single component Angular modules. And then I went into, oh my god, I had like 2 different things that I explained in a talk, where I would try to remove as many Angular modules as I could, and I ended up having just one per bundle. It kind of felt like having this depth property, but it was with Angular itself. It was even in View Engine without Ivy, because it did still use modules in some way, but the least way possible.
Yeah, I ran into this when I was working on my talk for NGConf about revisiting a reactive router with Ivy, and even the package that I just recently released, Angular routing package. Like I said, you can do. Initially, I had written it with just components, and everything was a component. You can render it, but like in practice, it wouldn't have been feasible to do because we're just not there yet. You still need a module at some. You still need to lazy load a module at some point. So I ended up going back and adding support for lazy loading modules, and then along with lazy loading components. So
Right. So you
that definitely,
experience it yourself.
yeah. And like I said, Ivy made lazy loading components easier. But like I said, in some cases, you still need to load a module first before you load that component. So it'd be good to have some more baked in support for doing that sort of thing.
This will be very important to a thing that's not mentioned on this list, which is Angular elements,
Mm-hmm.
because the bundle size is simply too big at this point for them to be usable outside of enterprise environments.
Yeah,
So
and that was one thing that wasn't mentioned. Like there are other things in the list that weren't mentioned that I don't think we'll have time to get into today.
right.
But yeah, Angular elements, being able to, like I said, smaller bundles, Angular elements without modules would be great, uh, just to give you more flexibility there, or maybe the uptick of usage would be better there. But yeah.
It would be an easier learning experience. It would also make the framework less rigid,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
maybe I don't. Well, I said maybe this is one of those things. Maybe the community will step in and throw some proof of concepts together of how we can do some more things with Angular elements and see if we can do something there. If we can, and if we don't have the tools there, then maybe that's something we can talk to the
I
team
did try
about.
to do that when Ivy was released. I went out and made like experiments. What's the state of Angular elements, like the
Mhm.
out of the box experience, and then I hacked around and tried to remove modules, and I think I ended up with like maybe it was a 16 kilobyte version of a Hello World Angular element, and then
Okay.
I did like a tiny application with like exercising some of the Angular features, and it ended up being 35 kilobytes.
Hmm.
But style compilation wasn't really working, but someone from the community figured out how to do that. So it is possible, but it's not very convenient.
Yeah.
So it would be nice to get that at some point, but it's not even on the list here. So it's not what they're looking into currently, and that's okay.
Yeah,
So
shout out
we have
to
one last item, right?
I give a shout out to Sirkin real quick for because he
Hmm.
probably the one Sirkin Pregular. I know that's a project that he's his baby project that he's been working on. So definitely going to plug that real quick. And then we'll get
Regular is Angular syntax, but it will compile to a different runtime, a smaller runtime, more maybe even a more performant runtime.
okay.
So and
Yeah, if you want to be on the bleeding edge, then definitely go check that out. I'll put his this up here so you can see the name of it to go check that out. Just search for that, and if you want to contribute to that, feel free. Last one is migration to ESLint, and I'm going to throw a quick plug out here because this has been out here for a while, and NX is looking at making that. We haven't previously made that an option for Angular projects, but coming soon, we will have. We're looking at adding ESLint as an option, so that because we need to start moving there now, so we'll have the option to use that going forward. So just want to throw that quick plug in there before we get into the other plugs.
Yeah, well, I just want to disprove a myth. I saw someone writing, well, what's the big deal? TSLint will continue to work.
Mm-hmm.
No, it won't. On December 1st or December 20th?
Mm-hmm.
The whole repo will be archived. There will be no more commits ever, unless someone forks it, of course, and maintains it. But any version of TypeScript after that could break TSLint.
Mm-hmm.
And that would mean Angular couldn't upgrade to the next version of TypeScript before they kind of added another option of ESLint or whatever they want to. Now they're actually saying migration to ESLint, so seems like it would be that one. It was supposed to land in version 9, but Ivy was a even bigger effort than the team thought. So it was postponed to version 10, but now it didn't make it into version 10, and now it's in the future list, which means it's not actively being worked on now. And
yeah, but at least
the future list means it's
will be
not,
at some point. Yeah, they're
well,
considering.
the future list means it might not make it at any point, but this one I would hope is a certain thing in the future, or I would be very sad.
Okay, well, we made it. We made it through the we made it through the entire list because it was a lot. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap up there. Do you, as we do, what I know that you're a writer on in depth. I know you got some plugs, maybe some blogs, some additional blog posts or anything. Is there anything you got coming up soon that you like to throw out there?
Yeah, well, I want to plug indepth.dev. It started out as Angular indepth. Now it's actually a company providing educational resources for everything web related, and it continues to have free articles about advanced topics, going beyond just Angular. So that's very interesting. And we have more and more writers joining. We have a community manager. And I'm helping onboard new writers as well. And if you're interested in joining, there's a form at the very top in a small banner where you can apply for becoming a writer. Yeah, there's this one. No, I guess it's replaced by NX, so thank you for that. But there's one that says become a writer.
You're welcome.
There's one that says become a writer in the blue bar. Yeah. So fill out that form, and our community manager will get back to you. We have a lot of new talented writers joining, so we keep pushing content. There's still a lot of Angular content, but we're also trying to get more general web and maybe some React and other stuff in there as well.
Yeah, I definitely see some stuff, some things that I've read on here that have been, like I said, definitely great articles there. A reform for WordPress at Scully. Santosh got one here for Towards a Better Future for Angular. Definitely check out In Depth, and you'll have more stuff coming up there.
The final thing I want to plug is the Deep Dive podcast that I'm currently the host of. It's also part of the In Depth family. there's also a deep dive newsletter that you can subscribe to. And yeah, we moved from Medium, and I'm very happy. It was a long struggle, and they were basically not being nice to people, writers or publishers or readers, and they have continued down that path. And I'm really not a big fan of Medium at all. I removed all my content from there a while ago, and now we have our own platform. And I hope that by now we have a pretty good writing experience. It's been a big effort to make that, but we have a team of developers working on improving that. And yeah, this is the website for the deep dive. It's the deepdive.simplecast.com, and then there's a button that says what is it, listen and subscribe. So you can find all your different podcatchers on there, links for that with that button, or you can just listen to it directly on the website. There's no certain. What's that?
Yeah. I said, I've listened to a couple of the episodes and definitely been very informative there. I'm looking at maybe creating a podcast form of this also, so I have to check out Simplecast to see. I've heard it mentioned a couple of times. Another guy I've talked to, B. Dougie, Brian Douglas, shout out to him, and you that have mentioned Simplecast, so maybe I have to check that out.
What's the one with John Papa and Dan Wallin and Watt Bell?
Real Talk JavaScript.
Yeah, they also use it, and I can tell you now from experience that it's really easy to use. It's pretty cheap. I think is it like $15 a month, and then you get some number of downloads or streams, 50,000 or something like that. And then there are even more expensive plans. I think the most expensive one is $85 per month. Then you get this website, and you get the management portal, and they will basically push it out to all the different vendors of podcast platforms. So it's a very nice experience.
Okay. Yep. I'll get this plug in here while we're doing it. If you like the show, you can sponsor me on GitHub, or you can subscribe to the Twitch channel. Both of those things, follow and subscribe on the Twitch channel. Both those things help me out. Because I know that, like I said, there's a cost and time associated with doing Simplecast, so I definitely would like to do that if possible. So I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, we'll wrap up there. Lars, thank you for coming on, letting us do the deep dive into the Angular roadmap per se. Definitely got some more information there, and for everyone to go back and check out there. We'll have links to all the items in the show notes, the things we talked about here, so that you can easily reference those. But yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Brandon. See you.
And we'll see y'all later.